it felt, I think he was trying to say something with this movie, because everybody says this movie's overly sentimental, but it's also has this dark, really dark element to it that most people forget. When people talk about this movie, they talk about the joy that this movie has, but there is a seriously underlining dark element to this movie, which I believe is Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart working out their PTSD from the war.
Mhm.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis,
I'm Michael.
and we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. Michael, why are we here?
In preparation for the holiday season, we are discussing It's a Wonderful Life, my favorite Christmas movie.
This is by far one of the best Christmas movies. It's a bit of a cliche, but that's okay.
Yes, it's wonderful news, for when all these wonderful people get into the swim, it's a wonderful life. For never before has any film contained such a full measure of the joy of living, the drama of living, and above all, the glorious romance that makes this such a wonderful life.
Don't you ever get tired of just reading about things?
Yeah. Hey, what are you doing tonight?
And I don't want to get married to anybody, you understand? I want to do what I want to do. And you...
It's a Wonderful Life came out in 1946. It stars James Stewart and Donna Reed. It was written and directed by Frank Capra and produced by him. Pretty much everything. He did a bunch of stuff. And this was during a time where not a lot of people wrote the scripts that they actually made.
It was a flop.
Yes.
Yeah, it came out. It did not do well.
It came out around Christmas time, even though Frank Capra didn't think of it as a Christmas movie. It came out during Christmas. It didn't really become a Christmas classic until the 1970s, and the reason is because they lapsed on their copyright. Some clerk didn't file their copyright, and it became public domain for 20 years. It was in the public domain, and so because of it was in a public domain, channels didn't have to pay a royalty to put it out. And because
so every Christmas season, they were playing it. TV stations were playing it for free. Wow.
Now, 20 years later, in the 90s, there was a company that got a hold of a judge, and they got the rights to it. But before then, for 20 years, it did not have a copyright. It was in public domain, which is probably one of the reasons that it became a classic, is because if you can play it endlessly,
for free every
for
Christmas season, then that's an interesting side note for that. One of the so for those who do not know, this movie is about a small town lender. He's a building and loan lender who has ambitions to be great, do something great with his life. And he, through circumstances that he cannot control, he keeps getting asked to stay in this small town. He becomes a prominent member of the society, and he falls on hard times where he becomes desperate, and he thinks about offing himself. And there is prayers that go out, and God sends an angel to show him what kind of wonderful life he actually has. This movie is so good. It's hard to say it, because every time I watch it, every year I watch it, and there's something new that I gain from it. It's a different time, because watching this, I realized how chopped up our films are now.
Yes.
Some of the camera shots just sit on
the characters.
James Stewart, and no cuts, no nothing. It's just on him. And you get to see real raw acting.
Raw emotion.
And I'm there for it. Like I was finding myself in my head just kind of, wow, this is a long shot. Like it's just keeps going. Straight shot, and it just keeps going.
Well, there's shots where you see them on one side of the street and it's on them, and they have a dialogue scene while they're walking down the street or across the street and stuff like that. And we, as new movies, they just chop them up. So it's kinetic nowadays because everybody's attention is so out there. So you can imagine if this was released in theaters today, there were too many scenes that are slow, so everybody's going to be opening up their phone while they're watching it and one of the reasons that movies nowadays are cut up so much is that just keeps people's attention on them, because attention spans are so lacking nowadays. But getting back to the performance of Jimmy Stewart. So Jimmy Stewart actually was suffering from PTSD. He flew over 20 missions in World War II. I believe he joined up. He was not drafted. And he was already a successful actor at the time. He had already run his Academy Award. So in 1941 is when he won his Academy Award. We go to war, I think, the following year.
No, December 7th, 1941 is where we went.
Okay, so he actually won his Academy Award the same year that we went to war. So he was already a famous actor. So he goes to war.
Interesting.
And he's actually a decorated pilot. He's actually decorated, but he was suffering from PTSD because, I mean, you got to imagine. So they flew in formations that if somebody was downed, they couldn't get out of the formation. So you basically heard your buddies, other pilots, dying while you had to stay as calm as possible because you were still flying your own plane. Yeah. I mean, you got to imagine that, like, so he had PTSD during this movie. And Frank Capra was actually in the war as well. So Frank Capra was the director and writer of this film, was actually, it felt, I think he was trying to say something with this movie, because everybody says this movie's overly sentimental, but it's also has this really dark element to it that most people forget. When people talk about this movie, they talk about the joy that this movie has, but there is a seriously underlining dark element to this movie, which I believe is Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart working out their PTSD from the war. Yeah. And Jimmy Stewart actually said that there's a specific scene that we're going to probably really get into. When the character of George Bailey falls on hard times, he goes to a bar.
So he's facing just go ahead. He's facing jail time because his uncle, who's kind of a simple man,
lack of a better, he
loses $8,000. Now, it's funny because
should we do spoilers? It's almost 100 years old.
It's almost 100 years old. You should just see it. But he loses $8,000. Now, earlier in the film, they were talking about how people buy their building through the building and loan, buy a home for $5,000. So if you think about in those days money, $8,000, I mean, you're probably somewhere around $500,000 to $1 million that they lost in today's money.
Oh, geez, that much.
If you think about it, right?
So 20,000, I heard estimates because he gets offered a $20,000 pay from the villain of the story, Potiphar, and that supposedly would translate to about $300,000 a year.
Oh, okay. So then a little high on that estimation. But of course, housing prices have just skyrocketed. I was thinking about it, and I was just thinking about, okay, if an average house is about $400,000 to $500,000 in today's money,
yeah,
and they just lost that amount and about half more, you're somewhere around probably 700,000 that their business lost, and he's facing possible jail time because of that.
Yeah, because it looks like embezzlement. It looks like what you're doing is you have a business, and this money's supposed to go to the business, and if the money's missing, then where did it go? And Uncle Billy's he is an idiot. Like that's just to put it lightly. There's certain things that he says throughout the movie that kind of show that he's probably a good-natured man, but he's really like,
I kind of like that he's a simple man. You see him with animals. He's got all these pets around and stuff. It's kind of obvious that George Bailey's father, who passes away at the beginning of the film, is kind of the linchpin of the family. You can kind of get that vibe from it.
And then the linchpin is kind of moved to George after his father's death. And there's so many great scenes where you see that he's trying to get away, but because of principle, because of duty, he's like, I'm not going to leave this. Like and that's what's so great about his.
Do you think that this is showing a antithesis a little bit of the hero's journey?
Yes, probably, because the hero's journey is in his brother Harry,
who goes out into the world,
makes a huge impact on the world.
Finds
he's a
kind
fighter
of like
pilot.
Fame and fortune.
Yes,
finds a beautiful wife and
gets honored after the war.
Medal of Honor. He wins the Medal of Honor.
So
by saving a whole transport of American soldiers.
Yes. So he is actually the hero's journey. Whereas I would argue that what would you call this? It's not the antithesis of the hero's journey. It's like I don't know.
Well,
what's a good way to put that?
It, in a sense, yeah, it is kind of the antithesis of the hero's journey. And this came to mind while I was thinking about this, is that phrase from Fight Club where Tyler Durden says, we all thought that we would be rock stars and movie gods.
Yeah.
And we're slowly realizing that we're not.
Yeah.
And we're very angry,
pissed off about it. Yeah.
Now, George is not, he's not pissed off about that. You see him.
You see underlining rage, though. There's certain scenes where he's just fuming. Like he's just, I can't get out of this town.
Well, he comes to a breaking point, and it's really sad to watch. And they do such a good job of showing him have his mental breakdown.
Yeah.
He
looks directly at the camera, which was such a rare thing to do in those days. You did not look at the camera.
He hit a chord because, and maybe this is just us, but maybe other men could relate.
Oh yeah.
My daughter was watching this with me, and she was just like, why is he so sad or angry? Like, why? And I was just like, sometimes the ladies don't understand how close we are to just having a complete meltdown. Sometimes, with all the pressure of it all. And I mean, especially the holidays, and now it's Christmas and you're trying to, get things for your kids. And
then you have some fat Reddit guy who gets all the reward,
all the credit
for what you fucking did. Fuck that
some make-believe fat redheaded guy that's part of the patriarchy that takes all the credit, and us fathers who bust their butts,
who actually worked for that.
I tell my kids I am Santa Claus, so it's all good.
It's all good.
So he has this meltdown, and you see the kids, and he kind of blows up at the kids and stuff. And I'm not saying it's right, but you get it.
You get it.
Most men who watch
completely, this, they're going, oh my gosh, I am that guy.
They're gonna get it, right? There's just
because men want to make a mark on the world. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't, right?
He's watched his friends all
make a mark on the world. Yeah, he's watched his friends make a mark on the world. This movie, so this movie really is, it's like got a few layers to it, right? So you got this you got the happy, like it's a small town vibe, and like his seething anger about not being successful is driving him insane. So there's this scene in it where a friend of his offers him to go to Florida. He's like, why don't you drive down to Florida with us? And they're like, well, we got all this going on. And then they drive away, and you watch him walk back to his car, and he kicks the door closed. And it's so good because you're just going, he's freaking pissed that he has to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, the world, my life is just going by without me.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, at the end of the film, really, he gets bailed out by his community, right?
Yeah. Well,
but nothing really changes. His attitude changes.
His attitude about where he's at changes.
Nothing really changes. He just
doesn't go to jail. Like, he's not going to go to jail. But
my point is that he's still in the small town. He's still
struggling. He's still got this business that's not doing grand. Yeah.
It's still all the things. The only difference is now something inside of him has changed. His attitude.
Well, he's seen his life without him.
And he's seen what he's done for the community.
Right.
And so it's interesting because the hero's journey is very individualistic, really. I mean, so when Jordan Peterson talks about the hero's journey, he brings it back to it being about the community, because you slay the dragon, you get the gold, you bring the gold, and you disperse it out with the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this, he's not going out and slaying a dragon, but he's slaying dragons. He's fighting
the man that wants to take down. He's fighting the
man. Yeah. I mean, Potter is the kind of the villain of this story. Well, who never gets his comeuppance, right? He never really.
He really doesn't, does he? But that's like true to life, because the people who do you dirty usually don't get their comeuppance.
Yeah, it doesn't. Nothing really happens. So in the film, the lost $8,000 that puts him in this huge bind, it made its way, ended up in the hands of Potter, and he knew it wasn't his.
Who's not honest, who's dishonest about it, who keeps it and doesn't tell anybody.
Anyway, so he's dishonest about it. He knows it's theirs. He keeps it and then never gets his comeuppance. Jordan Peterson talks about slaying the dragon, right? And then dispersing the gold with the community. I mean, maybe George Bailey is doing this throughout his life. He just doesn't know it, right? He doesn't understand what's really happening.
Well, the impact that he might have.
And the impact. He doesn't know the impact that he has, which is what Clarence, the angel from God that comes and helps.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the religiosity of this movie, because you cannot have prayer, angels, or supernatural things in movies nowadays and still have them be considered.
Yeah, I mean, they made kind of a little bit of a remake with Nicolas Cage, The Family Man.
Oh yeah, it's like it's not even that good.
But it's just nowhere near as good, but even not that good at all. But it's secular.
Yeah, no it religion, doesn't have God in it, no religion. Yeah.
And this is, I mean, it's very.
So this opens up with prayers. It opens up with people praying for
George Bailey,
which is something that you don't see prayers in movies anymore, ever. There's so many prayers in this movie. And granted, this movie comes out right after World War II. So the year after World War II is over, this movie comes out, which is probably what attributed to its failure initially.
Possibly. Yeah, I mean,
they just
America might have been jaded at the time. We just got out of a world war. Like, I would think that everybody
of the Nazi regime were made public, and so people are sitting there going,
"Holy shit! This is like humans did this.
Humans did this. Yeah,
what the hell?" And so everybody might have been a little jaded at the time, and so this film might have just kind of not hit home.
Yeah. But so prayer you would think would have been people's, like, being prayerful after a war. You would think that people would be more religious, but it probably, and that's what this movie is. It's a heavily religious movie. It starts with a bunch of prayers, and then it goes to a couple of angels talking. And then
is it Peter and Joseph?
Peter and Joseph. So they're saints, essentially.
And
Clarence.
Peter tells Joseph to call on Clarence. Clarence comes.
And it's the frame in which the movie takes form, right? It talks about George Bailey, and he saves his brother. And
do you think there's any significance of George Bailey's wife? Do you think there's significance in the names? So
Mary,
Saint George, the dragon, Mary.
Did you just think about that?
I'm just thinking about this. Mary, his wife,
who's
Mother of God.
Mother of God. Huh. Interesting. Well, I got some theories. I got some theories because I think Mary is the hero of this story.
Oh yeah. Oh, no doubt.
So get this. Reals. Mary. This is. I think this
what
is
a good woman. It's lost.
It's lost because
in that
feminism
moment,
has
where his
destroyed.
Family,
feminism has destroyed this type of woman, the woman who is stand by the man in his worst times, and continue to support him in his worst times. Nowadays, most women are gonna see him freak out because he's under all this pressure, and they're gonna go, "I'm taking the kids and I'm out," rather than "I'm sticking with you through thick and thin." And this is where she is the hero of this story. It's not him. Yeah. He's dealing with all these things. He's taking on the burdens. He's going to go to jail for Uncle Billy. He admits that it's him that took the money. Him that and people started, like, they even started saying, like, is it a woman that you spent all the money on? Is it, like, do you have another business venture that you're trying to do it with the money? Like, all these accusations. And we as an audience know that he's actually a good man and he's true, because there's that the floozy that everybody thinks that he's involved with, even though he's not. He's just kind to her, and she might have a bit of a crush on him. And so, but the wife, she's the true hero of the story because she's sticking with him. She's supportive of him. She believes in him. And this is all stuff that's lost on modern feminism.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she goes out,
and she's the one that, yeah,
he
you're
leaves,
right.
And she goes out and she makes all the calls. She calls in all the favors
together, calls in all the
grabs
favors.
the community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing, like,
saves his butt. She saves his butt.
I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about how men have a hard time being connected to the community. Women have a much easier time, just part of their nature, I think.
Well, because women are more interested in human beings and men are interested in things.
And so women will be more connected to the community, and men will kind of keep the lone wolf kind of mentality. Also, I mean, men have pride. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
There's a whole bunch of underlining issues, probably, but this is also what makes men driven and successful and that kind of thing. So,
but she calls out to the community, and the community answers, right?
Yeah.
So,
so she is the hero of this story. It's fascinating to me. I was watching one thing about this that said that this is a misogynistic film because Mary just wants to marry him and have his children and stuff like that. And it's like, and she has no identity outside of him because she's becomes an old maid. And it's like, what are you guys talking about? She's the hero of the story. She gets him out of this bind. She's the one that goes to the community and probably does this thing where, like, even though she's probably not telling people, oh, remember when he did this for you, you really need to help him out. That's probably not the attitude I would imagine she was taking, but she was going to the community and going, he's in trouble. And it's so great because it's a good woman who looks at a man like that and still sees good and potential, and he doesn't talk to her about it, which is one thing because he probably doesn't want to worry her, but his whole demeanor, because he, like the scene where he's kissing his kid and the kid's putting tinsel on his head. I mean, I was just crying at that point because because he's looking at life in prison, and this kid, and he's like he's just holding his kid. I mean, it's just a great scene.
And I love how it shows her eyes, and
she knows something's up.
You get that she's seeing that something's up. It's just
even
like
though he hasn't said anything to her about what's going on,
and she's catching the vibe that something is off.
And that's why when he leaves the house, she immediately, you see her, like, she goes, I'm calling Uncle Billy. Yeah. And so obviously Billy told her the situation that they find themselves in. And so that's when she's like, okay, I got to bring this community together to help out this guy that's been fighting for this community forever. I mean, I'm still kind of choked up about it because it's such a great. And then Jimmy Stewart's performance, to know that he was suffering from PTSD from the war through this is, I mean, unbelievable. So insurance companies have a suicide clause nowadays, but you can imagine in 1946, they probably didn't have a suicide clause. And
he goes to Potter, the enemy of this story.
Of the story, and pretty much begs him. Yeah.
And he begs him, and Potter kind of gloating and gleeful because, well, remember, Potter has the money.
Yeah, Potter has the money. So he knows what's going on.
He knows what's up. But he makes fun, evil. And he says,
absolutely.
And he says, and a lot of people, and he says, you're worth more dead than alive.
And that's when, and you can see it on Jimmy Stewart's face when he goes, "That's an idea." Like
and he ends up at a bridge
where he's gonna, and that's where Clarence saves him. And Clarence is like this bumbling. It's so perfectly done because he's like this bumbling angel that doesn't really like, kind of has a what would you say, like a happy-go-lucky attitude about everything.
Yeah.
So, but
the faith of a child.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
that's what the angels say. Peter and Joseph.
Yeah, they say he has
he has the faith of a child.
Well, and what's so great about it is that Jimmy Stewart's still acting as if he's still thinking about this. He's still in a dark place.
Yeah.
And then you have Clarence, who's this kind of like
a happy puppy, really.
Yeah.
Like just this happy pup. That's the way the vibe I got from him was like a happy puppy.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, everything's good.
And everything's okay.
Hey, it's you. Yeah, I like you. Like,
And that's so, and Jimmy Stewart's still acting dark. He's still really, really in a dark place because he hasn't fixed anything in his life. He's just saved this guy who he thinks might have a screw loose.
He gets to see the glimpse of the linchpin that he has been in the community and how the community is if he had never been born.
Mm-hmm.
Because he makes a comment. He's like, I wish I had never been born. And to Clarence, and then Clarence is like, okay. All right, here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Here's a glimpse. Here's a glimpse of a life, the world without George Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to see, Potter has complete control over the town.
It's
just
like
kind of a mess.
It's like a mini Vegas. It's like got showgirls and it's got
all these bars. It doesn't say like nude girls or anything, but you can tell that it's like strip clubs and stuff.
Yeah.
Violet, you see like getting arrested for prostitution or something, probably and his mother's running a flop house. It's just kind of sad. The whole thing's kind of sad without him. His father, there's a conversation he has with his father at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want to do big things, Dad. Like, but then his father's just like, well, I feel like in our small way, we have been doing great things here for the people here of this community where we help people get into a home.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like, especially nowadays with the advent of social media, everybody gets a little bit of FOMO. Everybody like gets on and they're just like, oh, so-and-so, they're living their life.
They're living their best life.
Doing this thing.
Yeah.
It's like I had the opportunity to chat with some of my the guys I wrestled with in high school, and they're still in hometown, right? And I've left, I've lived forever away, but I left that hometown. But I mean, when I was hearing some of the stuff, because like one was on the search and rescue. I think he was a volunteer firefighter for the community and stuff. And it's interesting because it's like, just because you haven't left this small town doesn't mean that you're not
having.
It doesn't mean that you're not a linchpin in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you can still be a great asset to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what his father was kind of saying is like, well, I feel like we're doing a great thing here.
Yeah.
Right. And this goes back to Tyler Durden. It's like, we all thought that we'd be rock stars and movie gods, and we're not. Right. So people think they're going to go out there and find their fame and fortune
thinking about that is like, if we could realize the value in our simplistic life, like it's something that I struggle with all the time. Like am I even making an impact? Am I doing anything great with my life? It's like you have these questions often, especially when you're financially strapped and you're like, and everybody goes through this, like like everybody does at some point in their life. And even the most wealthiest people in the world, probably were super poor at one time. I mean, Jeff Bezos started Amazon. He just started as a regular guy, and he's one of the most wealthy people on the planet now.
I read a book with my buddies, and we were talking about it. And in the book, there was a story of kind of a mentor told this kid, go write down your top 10 people that you want to that you want to achieve their greatness in order for you to feel like your life was well lived. And he had people like Nelson Mandela and probably big like Jeff Bezos, Winston Churchill. Yeah, these people
that had great lives. Yeah,
these amazing. And going over the list, he was just like, you do realize that these people are top 0.00001% of the world, right? If your standard for a successful life are these people, there's like no way you're going to get that. Yeah. It's not like a diss on anyone. It's just a realization that you can have a good life, but just the simple life. It doesn't, and this is why it's a wonderful life. I mean, it's right in the name. It's
it
just is. Because you're not going to be fame, fortune, I want to do big things, Dad. I want to change the world. And he's just, we are changing. We're changing people's lives right here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not 1 million, but maybe it's 10,000, right? Like we'll change 10,000 people's lives.
Yeah.
Rather than, the millions of lives that
well, and this is what most men struggle with, is like the mediocre life, right? Especially when the people that you admire are the people that have these extraordinary lives, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's only like 0.111. It, like, everybody can't have extraordinary lives, right?
Yeah. Not everybody can be Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, not everybody can be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Not everybody can be George Washington.
Yeah, it's just not in the cards. But you can be
George Bailey. You can make a small impact on a small amount of people.
The good king of your own sphere of influence. Really thought it was interesting, the kind of the dynamic between individualism versus communalism. You can go out, get your bag, it's all about you and do your thing and that we are a society of like individualism. But we live in a world where we should probably be more enveloped in our community, right?
Well, this is Jordan Peterson talks about this. He says, if we all individually flourish, then we collectively succeed. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's like, if everybody does their best to individually do well, then your community in the process does well as well. So the problem is where there's forced. Like this movie has been accused of being a communist kind of movie, is because it's more important to him to help the community than it is to get rich, like Potiphar, and Potiphar's trying to get rich. the flourishing of individuals inadvertently helps the community. I think is the best way to look at it. So if everybody's doing the best that they can do, then it indirectly affects the community as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if everybody's only doing as much greed as they can at the expense of everybody around them, that's where the bad things happen. That's where you get the greedy. That's where you get, and see, this is what communism turns out to be. So it starts out as, hey, we're going to help the community and everybody gets equal to according to their needs. And there's always somebody who rises to the top who's the only person getting good things.
Who gets to decide?
And then
who gets to, according to whose needs?
Like, according to whose needs? I decide. Yeah. So I think that's the best way to look at it. Is it's not necessarily that the individual is just an individual. He's still a process in the system that we live in.
Yeah.
So if he's not being so greedy that so what it is it's honest progress.
Mm-hmm.
If it's honest, if you're not trying to steal and wheel and deal and get if you're honest, it's like, I provide a service to everyone around me and they pay me for it. And then they provide a service to everyone around them and they get paid for it.
Yeah.
If it's like that, then the community grows and grows and grows and becomes better and better. And that's what's supposed to be what Americana is all about. Where it gets, but in any system, there's always corruption. So there's always a Potiphar, and there's always somebody like Marx who's the opposite of Potiphar, right? But he's also looking out for number one as well. So the whole point is I guess that I'm trying to get at is be individualistic, but not at the expense of everyone around you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're individualistic and you're trying really hard and you're honest, then the cream rises to the top.
The stats are very, very clear on businesses that don't screw people over. Like, business that screws people over always comes back to bite that business in their butt. It does happen.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do for your business is take care of your customers.
Yeah.
Like, hands down.
But then there's always the George Baileys. He's doing everything he can. He's lifting up the community, and yet he's getting screwed at some point. But he's getting screwed at some point because there's evil people like Potiphar, right? Somebody who's going to be dishonest, because Potiphar gets the money. And if Potiphar was an honest person and wasn't trying to gouge everybody around him, he would have turned the money back. He said
back to him.
Hey, you left $8,000. That would have been Potiphar raising up his community. But instead, there's always going to be people like this, right? There's always going to be George Baileys in the world, and there's always going to be Potiphars in the world.
Yeah, that's why Jordan Peterson says, he's like, there will be snakes, right? There will be serpents. That's why it says
the do you in, and one way or another.
Somewhere in the scriptures, it's be as wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves.
Yeah.
So it's you do have to watch out for the Potiphars of
the world,
your community.
I still believe, even though I've achieved very little in my life, I still believe that if you work to success at the expense of no one, then it rises. You rise.
And that's kind of the point. So George Bailey, like, he complains about his drafty old house, but like, his wife has made a beautiful home.
Yeah.
He has beautiful kids that love him.
And he has beautiful kids that love him.
It's just like, I mean, and like I said before, it's like, nothing really changes. They bail him out, but he's still kind of back to square one. Like he's still got a business that he's got to run, and it's going to be hard. And he
still got a drafty
still
house.
has a drafty house. He's still,
so it's basically his attitude about
it all changed.
It's very Marcus Aurelius. It's like, there's a lot of things I can't change in this world. I have to accept where I am and what I can do, what I actually can do to change. Here's a dark thought. If Mary isn't the good woman that she is, this becomes a very, very different and dark story. If she immediately sees him struggling and is
he probably would have gone to jail, but because his attitude was good, he might have, who knows, maybe that's another film. It's a Wonderful Life 2.0.
Yeah.
Like he goes to jail, but because his attitude has changed, maybe he didn't get bailed out, but his attitude has changed. Now, maybe it's a Joseph story now.
Yeah, he does.
Now he becomes the right-hand man to the prison.
Yeah.
And then because he's the right-hand man to the prison, other opportunities open up. And pretty soon the Pharaoh takes note and is like, shoot, I really need somebody who's
good at this.
Good as him, as my right-hand man.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a bunch. It's Gladiator. It's the
nobility doesn't, your outward station does not dictate whether you can be noble or not. You can't change your circumstances, but you can change your attitude about them.
I do like the idea of just keeping in mind that his station, he's still in this small town. Like it doesn't show him,
it doesn't show him
to Europe or go to Europe like he always wanted. Well, that's not how it ends.
What's so interesting is the brother does a toast to him, the richest man in town, which isn't necessarily true. He's rich because of the friendships that he has.
But just rich in life.
Yeah. He doesn't actually have, wealth. He's
Potiphar, who's got all, and this is just a case of, it's not always only about money.
Yeah.
Potiphar's got all the money in the world, but he's a
crotchety old man that nobody likes.
He's a twisted old man, lonely, that probably only has people around him because he has money. Whereas if he lost it,
and I would argue that a person like that, a businessman like that, doesn't last long. Now it lasts long in this movie because they need something to drive the narrative, but because this movie takes place over many, many years. It's like something like 20, 25 years or something like that. But the thing is that most businesses that are ran with an iron fist, they don't last very long.
Yeah, and Jordan Peterson talks about that. Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about that if most narcissists get found out, right? Like most of them, if they have psychopathic tendencies, and just want to use people for
personal gain,
just personal gain.
Capra admitted that he kind of made Potiphar like a Scrooge character. I mean, it is worth revisiting because it does have these layers to it. What a wonderful movie. It's a Wonderful Life is a wonderful movie, and we suggest everybody goes out and see it. Audience, check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. If you are listening to this and not watching it, please go to our YouTube channel and like, share, and subscribe. It helps us out. In the meantime, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. Thanks, brother.
See ya.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
Attaboy, Clarence.